Hey gang, I am Joe Edelman and welcome to The Last Frame Live. Tonight we are back to our hows and whys gear conversation, which for tonight is going to be all about Flash. I promise I'll also do a Q&A before we wrap up, so start typing. I'll do my best to answer all of your questions in the next 60 minutes. And I'm going to make an excuse right out of the box and apologize. Today has been a crazy day. There's actually a whole lot of photo news that's happened. I've got a really exciting announcement about ImagingUSA that I want to tell you about. And the Phillies are playing right now, and they're winning 4-2, which is kind of a big deal because if you're a Philly sports fan, you get it, right? So in the meanwhile, if you're watching live, please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know you are here, where you're watching from. Already I got, let's see, a bad echo. Really? Anybody else here? Okay, I was going to say, Ken, I don't think everybody's getting that echo. I think that might be you. Sorry, sir. I got Renee here from Switzerland. Steve is here in the UK. Ron is here from tomorrow in Australia. Let's see. We got Ura in South Florida. Nicola's in Italy. Mark's here from South Carolina. Man, we got a crowd here tonight. Spinning Wheels in Arizona. So all of you, thank you. And if you're watching the replay, folks, no worries. Drop a comment in the video so that I know you're here. All of you are part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch The Last Frame every week. And for that, I'm going to work really hard to help you with your photography tonight. And of course, it would help a lot of people learn about The Last Frame if you do me a solid, hit that thumbs up. It's really easy to do below the video. The more thumbs up, the more YouTube recommends the show to other photographers. I promise it is not for the sake of my ego, okay? And of course, while you're down there, feel free to hit that share button. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Or you can go ahead and you can share the link, lastframe.live. I just dropped it in the chat there for you, so you can use that. This time, Twitter, Facebook, they're the fastest way to get the word out, okay? All right, so I'm sorry for those of you that like me to get right into the topic. I'll explain why I said that a little bit further down the road here, but I've got a couple announcements, things that I really want to tell you about because they benefit you. So number one, I've mentioned this the last 2 weeks. This is the last time I will be mentioning this because it happens this weekend. But the folks at the Yerba Beuna chapter of PSA, so it's Yerba Beuna, California, they have hired me to do a day-long virtual presentation this Saturday. So we're talking 9 a.m. Pacific time in the U.S., all the way until 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. It's actually 4 separate presentations. So there will be breaks, and there's a lunch break and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be talking about understanding creativity. We're going to be looking at a practical approach to composition. In other words, no rules, abstract photography, and I'm going to share my workflow for how I develop my images. They have opened this up because they have a Zoom account that handles 1,000 people at a time. So they have opened this up to the world to attend for free. So you do have to register. The link is in the description below the video. I am also going to share it in the chat for you. So if you're available Saturday, I would encourage you, tune in. Also, here's my big news for January. I'm really excited about this. I've been telling you guys that I will be presenting at ImagingUSA. And yes, I'm presenting at ImagingUSA, but instead of presenting once, I am going to be presenting 3 times while I'm at ImagingUSA. So apparently, I don't know the whole backstory. Somebody had to back out. I don't know what's going on, but they contacted me today and said, hey, we'd love to have you do something creative. Can you fill in on one of their hands-on pre-con classes? So I was like, yeah, you don't have to ask me twice. So I'm going to be doing 3 classes. The platform talk, that's in the big ballroom. Sunday morning, I know, January 21st or January 22nd, excuse me, at 8 a.m. I'll be talking all about color. Color is easy, it's powerful, it's emotional, and it sells. And I'll have a model, and I'll be doing a live demo. But the day before that now, on this Saturday, you have 2 opportunities to actually shoot what I shoot. So these are hands-on pre-cons. The first one is from 10 to 1. The second one is from 2 to 5. It's the same class. We just do it twice because they cap the groups at 35 people, okay? When portraiture and fashion collide, it is a creativity workshop. And trust me, I've done a couple of these. They are a ton of fun. So that's Imaging USA that's coming up. And if you really are crazy, April, a full week. You can spend a full week with me learning about what I do and how I do it, and that is at the Texas School. And you know what? Let me back up really quick. I forgot to give you the link for PPA so that you can register. And by the way, let me give you a little tip about PPA, gang. If you've never been to imaging, it's in Nashville this coming January, which, how can you go wrong? And if you've never been to the Gaylord Resort there, wow, right? It's like a city under a roof. It's pretty cool. But if you have never been, here's a cool little tip for you. If you join PPA between now and the registration cutoff, which is probably the beginning of January or so for imaging, you can attend your first Imaging USA for free. And if you haven't heard me talk about PPA memberships before, understand that a PPA membership comes with $15,000 worth of equipment insurance. So the insurance alone pays for your membership. And of course, there's all the educational material, everything. So I highly recommend it. If you have any questions about it, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And if you're interested, I should have the link here, and I wasn't prepared for that. I'm sorry, but send me a message from wherever you are. I have a link that can get you $35 off your first month. So aside from like travel and hotel, I can get you to Imaging USA pretty doggone cheap. And then you can see me talk, okay? So that stuff's all coming up. Going to be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to that. Just a quick follow-up about last week's video. It's all about competition and photographers and all that. If you didn't see it, I would encourage you to check it out. In fact, I apologize. Should have been prepared. Let me grab the link to it here so that you can watch it. In fact, actually, what I'm going to share is I'm going to share the article link, and this has the video embedded at the bottom. So there it is. Apparently, we struck a chord with that one, gang. If you were here, you heard it firsthand, but that video has been shared an incredible amount of times. F-Stoppers actually wrote an article about a live stream. They never do that, okay? So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to kind of take the internet at its word and say, hey, if you haven't seen it, check it out. I do feel that it's really solid advice, and it's really important advice, even if you're not trying to make money, okay? All right, so, the other news, Adobe. If you're a Photoshop user, wow. So yesterday, I think Adobe Max is happening right now. I don't track that well. I'm not going to lie. I've never been, but here's the thing. Adobe dropped Photoshop 2023. And it's got some changes, okay? Some changes that you need to know about. And I'm going to tell you about one of them because there's a piece of software that I've talked about a lot and I've recommended to a lot of you, and it doesn't work now. Yeah, I know. It's kind of a bummer. But here's the really big news for me. You all know that I'm not a Lightroom fan. Doesn't mean Lightroom's bad. It just means for my needs, Lightroom's not a great program. I use Adobe Bridge, and then I use Photoshop. The downside for the last several months, since I switched over to the new MacBook Pro with the M1 processor, Bridge was not built to work on M1. So for you PC users, what we Mac users do, there's a little program that's installed on most Macs. It's called Rosetta. And it basically can take any software program that's designed for the old Intel chips on Macs, and it can make them work on the new M1s. The downside is you do run into efficiency issues. It's not really buggy. Bridge wasn't buggy at all. It worked fine. But indeed, part of the great things about the M1 is it's a super fast processor. Bridge wasn't super fast, which was disappointing. Bridge is now an M1 piece of software. And I got to tell you, if you haven't downloaded it and set it up yet, gang, it screams. Oh my God, I love it. So I'm not going to give you a whole Photoshop tutorial. I'm not going to give you all the breakdown. I will tell you that the new object selection tools and the people selection tools are amazing. For those of you that have been following me for years, I'm also going to do a little bit of I told you so. When you look at the way those tools work, it's a set of checkboxes that you do. And you've heard me talk about the future of editing and editing software and how you're going to basically fill out a survey whenever you're ready to edit and start checking boxes. And that's exactly what's happening in this object selection tool and people selection tool. But I'll tell you what, it's insanely impressive. It's not perfect. Already, I've come up with a couple images where it just did an okay job, but not great. But several of the images I gave it, it nailed it. But here's the downside. Adobe took away, they say it's because of the M1, they took away a feature called extensions, which were kind of another version of a plugin, really. And I don't know why they had both in the first place. Somebody, I'm sure there are people that know why. I don't actually understand why they had plugins and why they had extensions and exactly what the difference is. But here's what I know. Since they took away the extensions and they only support plugins, and they have a whole plugin management tool now that works through the Adobe Marketplace, and it's actually very nice, JPEG Mini doesn't work with 2023 Photoshop if you are an M1 Mac user. There's no way to load it. And believe me, I tried a bunch of end arounds. I reached out to the folks at JPEG Mini today, and I'm not going to lie, I was extremely disappointed by their response. Their response was, well, you can go ahead and you can uninstall Photoshop 2023, use 2022, because that way you'll be on Rosetta, and then you'll still be able to use JPEG Mini. Why would I spend the money for an M1 processor and willingly reverse software when there is software available that is so much faster, so much better, and has all these new incredible features? And what was really frustrating about their answer, I'll tell you straight up, and believe me, I let them have it. What was really frustrating is they gave and offered no indication whatsoever that they had any intention of coming up with a legitimate end around, meaning reprogramming it or turning JPEG Mini into a plugin instead of an extension. So that means if you like JPEG Mini, because it's a great program, but the only way that you can keep using it with an M1 and 2023 Photoshop is to use the standalone version of JPEG Mini. And that means that you basically do your work, you save your JPEGs, and then you have to drag and drop them into the JPEG Mini program. So it's an extra step. Some of you will say, well, what's the big deal, Joe? And, maybe you're right. But for me, every step is time, and time is money. And I keep myself kind of busy. So when, we had this great functionality, I'm all about technology moving us forward, not backwards. And indeed, this isn't entirely JPEG Mini's fault, I want to be clear, but they have to have known that Adobe was going to upgrade Photoshop and make some of these changes. And even if they didn't know, just to say, well, sure, just go ahead and roll back your Photoshop. Don't use all the new features in Photoshop. That's a horrible answer from a company in our industry. So again, folks, look, we got to hold these companies accountable, and there's going to be a little bit more of that tonight, right? So that's all the news this week's discussion, okay? Please feel free to tune me out and ignore me in about 2 minutes, even in a minute. But please hear this piece that I'm about to say, right? 2 paragraphs worth of information. Number 1, I sincerely believe that Godox is the best choice for location and studio strobe lighting for the overwhelming majority of photographers who use flash. But please remember this before you tune me out. I am not here to debate, so I'm not going to debate anybody. I'll just delete you. Look, if you use a different brand, if you're a Wescott user, if you're a Profoto user, if you use Buff, good for you. If you are happy with it, good for you. I am in no way suggesting that you should switch, okay? So don't get your back up against the wall. Don't get all defensive about your brand. I'm going to speak facts tonight, and I'll be very clear about what my opinions are, because I am going to share some opinions, but I am not suggesting that you spend money. I'm offering this information to assist people that are new to lighting and who are trying to navigate the multitude of options that are out there. Godox doesn't sponsor me. I don't make any money from Godox. I have purchased every piece of Godox gear that I have, which includes 12 flash units and many batteries and accessories. So I've got a lot of money invested in the system. I also want to share in my career, just to give you some context, I have both owned and used strobes from Honeywell, potato mashers, you old folks, you know what I'm talking about, Vivitar, Sunpack, Dynalite, Speedotron, Paul C. Buff, and when we're talking Paul C. Buff, we're talking the original White Lightnings, Alien Bees, and Digibees. My list also includes Photogenics, which were serious workhorses of strobes, and a lot of you don't know this, Profotos, which I used for over 15 years in the early 2000s. I'm sharing that list with you so that you know that I'm not coming to the conversation because I lack experience with different lighting brands and units and all that kind of stuff. Look, I am kind of a self-proclaimed lighting nerd, right? I've used a lot of this stuff. As always, I want to share the hows and whys behind my lighting choice and the criteria that I would suggest that you consider before purchasing, right? So 2 weeks ago, I talked about the 10 things to consider before you invest in lighting gear, and it's based on those guidelines that I selected Godox. And I've been happily using Godox for almost 7 years now, right? In the case of flash units, honestly, the decision came pretty easy for me. There were one or two concerns at the time, and those concerns have since been eliminated. So I'll get to those concerns towards the end, right? But I do want to talk about a few of the other brands. So I'm going to kind of flip the script tonight. I'm going to talk about a couple of the other brands because I know that there are people that are going to tune in that are big FJ Wescott users, that are even big Profoto users. You're going to think that I'm trashing these brands in some way if you spend a lot of money on them. Please listen closely because I'm not trashing anybody. Both FJ Wescott and Profoto, they're good companies. They have a lot of good products. But that doesn't mean, just like my comments about JPEG Mini tonight, that we should not expect better and more from the companies that we support. So for me, FJ Wescott was out of the question from the get-go when it came to lighting, because when I got into Godox, I don't even know, for that matter, if FJ Wescott had actually released the FJ400 yet, okay? But overall, as we look at FJ Wescott today, they make a few nice modifiers. I mean, they make a lot of modifiers, but in my opinion, a few nice ones. However, in my opinion, most of their modifiers are honestly unreasonably priced. They are overpriced. My big issue, though, with FJ Wescott is I find them to be misleading as a company. And we live in a time period where, number one, because of things like the internet, et cetera, you know, it bothers me when a company is not going to be forthright about what they're doing. So in FJ Wescott's case, there is no doubt. Now, they have not confirmed this, right? But there is no doubt that they are rebranding Jinbei strobes from China. Just to give you a little example here, I'm going to take myself off the screen for a second, and let me get my mouse back over here. There's the Wescott FJ400. That's what it looks like, okay? Here is the Jinbei HD 400 that you can buy. You could buy from Alibaba. It's the same flash, I promise you, okay? So let me also be clear. I have no problems with Chinese gear. That's where Godox comes from, right? My issue is that Wescott continually tries to craft a marketing message that their designers came up with these strobes to make their system seem more organic, like it was their own, okay? In fact, you can find numerous videos online, on YouTube, accusing Wescott of deleting comments from their social feeds from people who made note of the Jinbei origins of their strobes. And to be clear, I have no problem with Jinbei strobes either. I don't like them as much as Godox. In fact, in a side-by-side comparison of the specs, Godox usually comes out ahead. Now, there's, obviously there's always going to be a feature here or a feature there, but overall, Godox comes out ahead. It's no secret, Adorama rebrands Godox units as Flashpoint. And you don't see them selling those units at a higher price either, right? You can buy the Flashpoints oftentimes cheaper than the Godox, not more expensive. So in my opinion, Wescott could be and should be honest with its customer base, right? In fact, honestly, I think they garner a lot more respect for the brand. Wescott was a lighting modifier company who wanted to continue to grow. They looked for an opportunity to do lighting, and they basically found the Jinbei brand and rebranded it. Lots of companies rebrand things, right? Nikon rebrands Tamron lenses. All the manufacturers rebrand oftentimes either full pieces of gear or parts of gear. Heck, you walk into a Costco and you buy Kirkland brand, you know darn well they didn't make most of the Kirkland brand stuff. Now, ironically, more and more, they're starting to make their own stuff, but a lot of it is just rebranded products. It's common knowledge, and they don't deny it. If Wescott would own that, it would be a lot more respectful. And look, I'm not going to drop any names, but I'll also tell you this. At least one of the Wescott Pro ambassadors uses Profoto strobes for his professional paid work. So what does that tell you about the Wescott strobes, right? And also, to hopefully you understand as consumers that every time you buy a Wescott product that has an influencer's name on it, I'm not going to name any names, you know who I'm talking about, a portion of your spend, a portion of the price tag that you are paying goes directly to that influencer. So for me, Wescott's not the kind of company that I want to support. It's expensive on a lot of things. Currently, the FJ200 is selling for almost $100 more than the Godox 8200. And lastly, the Wescott strobes are missing features, and truthfully, they're saddled with really odd design choices, in my opinion, right? And then there's Profoto. Let's get the bad stuff out of the way, and then I'll go through why Godox is such a big deal to me, all right? Even though I actually owned Profoto, and I had a Profoto D1, one of the older Profotos, literally spontaneously combust during a shoot. Not exaggerating, it's a true story. I will tell you that Profoto makes very high quality and very durable strobes. But that said, in my opinion, their strobes are ridiculously overpriced. We're talking speed lights that begin at $1,095. I mean, come on, really? And worse yet, in the last 5 years, Profoto has joined the influencer game, and they've done an excellent job of getting amateur photographers with more money than brains to purchase their lights. Look, for a photographer that's running like a high-end commercial business, it is very possible to justify the Profoto brand. Still, in my opinion, from a practical standpoint, more than anything, it's a status symbol. But that's coming from a guy that drives a Hyundai hybrid, to give you some context, okay? So, Palsy Buff, they're still in business. But unfortunately, since the passing of their namesake founder, they have not been able to innovate, and they've released only a few, honestly, very underwhelming products, which is really unfortunate because the company, Palsy Buff, is legendary for its outstanding customer service. For me, I'll always have a soft spot for Palsy Buff. The founder was this redheaded, eccentric engineer who created affordable and simple lighting that allowed me to afford enough lights to become the lighting nerd that I am. It's just sad that without their founder, they haven't been able to evolve into a lighting system that's highly portable and has battery options. The newest light that they released, the Link, is like crazy heavy. It's a big brick. And yes, it has a battery option, but there's nothing that's really practical about it. And I hate talking anything bad about Palsy Buff because I used them for years, loved them. But with his passing, unfortunately, that went the kind of the vision of the company, right? So honestly, that leads us with Godox. There's some other brands, and there's some other expensive brands. You've got the Edelman Chromes out there, all that kind of stuff. Again, expensive brands for the average photographer. And yeah, I'm calling myself average. I pay my bills with my camera and my lights and everything else, but there's no way that I'm going to justify that kind of expense, because if I were to use Profoto, sure, I'd have these really high quality lights and I'd have like 3 of them for what I've been able to buy 12 for, okay? So that leaves me with the Godox. And with Godox, you've got a massive system, massive. In fact, it's bigger than most of you are actually aware of, honestly, right? So you've got speed lights, you've got studio strobes that range, battery-powered studio strobes that range from 100 watt seconds, 200 watt seconds, 300 watt seconds, 400 watt seconds, and 600 watt seconds. It'll also even work AC-DC, okay? But those 100, 200, 300, 400, and 600, they all run on lithium rechargeable batteries. But Godox also has a full range of AC-powered strobes, and they even have power pack strobes like the old Dynalights and the Speedotrons that go up to 2,400 watt seconds of power, right? All of these, by the way, these strobes, all of them work off the same triggers. That's big, right? That's really big. So my go-to flash, and here's the breakdown. Oh, I told you, I did have concerns about Godox when I first bought it. So when I first purchased Godox, I purchased from Adorama, and I purchased the Flashpoint brand. The reason I did that was because Godox did not offer warranty support in the United States. So that meant I was considering purchasing an affordable, feature-rich strobe. In fact, it was the Godox 8200 that I was looking at, but it was the Flashpoint version that I bought. But I was considering this, getting it from a Chinese company that I knew little about, that at the time there was little information on, and there was no way for me to get it fixed. Adorama was offering a warranty. So made sense. You buy from Adorama, and instead of Wistro 8200, it says Flashpoint, okay? Who cares? I don't care what it says on it, right? So right now I've got about half and half. I think about half of my system are the Flashpoints, half of them are the Godox Wistros. Some of you are going to ask, do you have any of the 8200 Pros? No, I don't. The 8200 is fine. There's not enough in the Pro to make it worth my while to spend the additional money, okay? Not that it's bad, but it's not enough of a difference to me that I would upgrade, especially not when I've got, 8 of these, okay? Why do I have 8, by the way? You might want to wonder. For traveling. 4 of these stay in the case, the Pelican case that goes on the airplane with me. They never get unpacked unless I'm on location. That way, when I've got to pick up and go, I'm not having to pack stuff and make sure it's all there. It's dedicated lights that go out on the road. They're labeled, they're tagged, they've got red color bands on them so that I can spot them at teaching events, all that kind of stuff. So they're set up just for that. That's why I have so many of the 8200s. But these are the most versatile flash units that I've ever used, ever. So you'll notice this one that I'm holding, it's got a bare bulb head on it, right? So, if that refocuses, there you go. It's the bare bulb head. But here's the cool part, right? That bare bulb head, you know what, since it's going to keep rack and focus, we'll come back to here. It's switchable, okay? Igor, by the way, your 8200 is a rather yellowish orange light with a bare bulb. No, you maybe ought to clean your bare bulb or maybe have a bad one, but that's absolutely horribly incorrect information. Because let me just ask you, Igor, do you really think that I would be using this strobe if it gave me yellowish orange light? Do you really think that? Nah. So you might want to get yours checked out, or better yet, take your eyes out of the equation before you publicly make a statement like that and actually get a color temperature meter and measure what's happening, okay? All these brands that we're talking about have some variance when you're using them. Profoto, less than anyone else, but yeah. TK400, I don't use the round head. I'll talk about the round head in a minute, okay? If you bought the round head, man, you wasted your money. God, you wasted your money. So anyway, you've got the Fresnel head, like a speed light. You got the bare bulb. What's the difference? The Fresnel head just like a speed light, okay? The bare bulb, this is what you're going to want to use when you're working with a softbox, beauty dish, etc., because it's going to fill the whole thing. Whenever possible, meaning budget permitting, don't use a Fresnel head in a softbox or a beauty dish. It's not going to light the entire box as efficiently as a bare bulb. Mistake a lot of new photographers make with lighting is they buy a big modifier and they stick one of these in it. And what they don't realize is that even though they've got that big modifier, they're only lighting a small, narrow portion of the modifier, meaning that modifier is not giving them the light quality that they spent a lot of money to get. Okay? So we've got the versatility of the two heads. That's super, super important. Plus, lots of other accessories. Obviously, you can put these in brackets. You can put Bowens mounts on them. You can put soft boxes on them. 200 watt seconds is more than enough light for the average photographer. More than enough light. Now, if you are one of those photographers who insists, so maybe go back and watch what I said last week. If you're one of those photographers that insists on following trends and doing what everybody else does and not doing it as good as the people that originated it, then yes, you might want to go with an 8400 for 400 watt seconds or an 8600 for 600 watt seconds to get more power. But those of you that rushed down and bought an 8600 that thinks, oh my God, like you have to have that. No, you don't. Okay, because most of you don't really need it. And if you look at the flash powers you're using, you're going to realize most of the time you've got that 8600 dialed all the way down. It's way too much light. For years, I had 1250 watt second photogenics and barely got them over 1/8 power. And that was in a 14,000 square foot studio. It's just, you don't need that kind of light. These are awesome. Lightweight, simple, easy to work with. That's it, okay? I didn't bring, I do own two 8400s, by the way, and this is another thing for lighting, just to give all of you some thinking here. I hear from a lot of people that will tell me, oh yeah, I got a couple of these 8200s and I have an 8400 and I use the 8400 for my key light, for my main light, my key light. You're thinking backwards. In my studio, I do own two Godox 8400s, the 400 watt second strobes. They are my background lights. This is my key light. If I need to overpower the background, why try and overpower the background with the lesser power strobe and then have the higher power strobe as your key light? That makes absolutely no sense. Flip that script. So if you want background lights and you want extra power more than this, which by the way, this will do the job. I could use these in my studio as background lights. I went ahead and I got the 8400s because maybe once a year, I will run into a situation where I need extra light power. And so this way I have them and I'll go into my studio, I'll take them down, I'll pack them up and I'll go out and I'll use them. But I'm not kidding. I've averaged about once a year where I have taken those things out on location to use them. I've never used them as key lights in the studio. They only operate as background lights so that when I'm overpowering a background, I don't have to work as hard to make that happen lighting wise. Okay. One other modifier. So as much as I warn everybody, be careful with gas. Okay. Every now and then I get gas. I'll own it. I'm not going to lie. I've said that before, right? So my gas purchase for my Godox system, here, I'll put it together first before I show it to you. I am able to power it off of the Godox 8200. So I take the head off. Drop this gadget on. And there's a little belt pack that, or shoulder strap or shoulder harness that I can drop this into and I can wear it if I'm on location, right? But what this attaches to is a ring light. And the ring light camera mounts right here. Lens goes through there. This is an awesome light for fashion and beauty shooting. if you shoot a portrait up close, it's just like the annoying circular ring light in the eyes that we're all sick and tired of. So that's not how I use it, okay? I never use it for close-up shots, ever. I use it for full-length shots, and I will almost always, anytime I use it, have my subject standing directly against the background because it creates kind of a very soft ghost shadow that highlights the subject, okay? So it's, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, it's a novelty light. I use it occasionally. Again, fortunately, you know, I've already figured out a way to use it in a job where I made enough money that it justified the cost. So from a business perspective, I've gotten my return on it and I'm satisfied. But I'll own it. It started out as a gas purchase, okay? Oh my gosh, the Padres tied the game. It's now 4-4, if any of you care. So, all right, let me go back here because there's a couple questions. So we can take the rest of this conversation in a few different directions. So let me get some of these questions first. Daniel Martins, I bought the 80B2 for my 8200, so I have an 8400 when I need it. Yeah, and so what he's talking about is a bracket where basically you can mount two of these 8200 bodies into it side by side and then put the bare bulbs on the front so you get 400 watt seconds worth of power. That's absolutely an option. I've seen it. I don't use it. But yes, you can do that. Permatus, why don't you have the MS300 300 watt AC powered at $100? Because I don't use cords, personal choice. So the other piece to Godox, and I glossed over this a few minutes ago, so let me state this again in more detail. All these lights that I've talked about, the 8200, which I have in an 8100, 8300, 8400, 8600, they are all lithium powered. The 600, you can plug an AC power cord into it, but they're all lithium powered. Godox has several lines of AC powered strobes and some really, really reasonably priced ones. So the one that Permatus is talking about, indeed, the MS300, it's a 300 watt second strobe. It's small. It's about this big. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I did an article about that. This was a ways back, but let me just see here. If that's on my website, I will share it. Yep, there it is. So I will share a link to you for a write-up that I did about the MS200 and the MS300. And this is quite a ways back that I did this, but they're still available. Great strobes, but they're AC powered only. There are no battery options. Permatus, before I came into Godox, I was using the Pulse Buff Digibees. Oh, you know, I left the Interfit off my list. I used the Interfit Alien Bees too, right? Or Honey Badgers. So I was using those strobes in the studio and had cords like everywhere. And I went to great lengths to kind of try and run my cords up towards the ceiling and keep them out of the way and that. But cords are just a pain in the butt. So to be able to, you know, literally cut the cord, so to speak, and switch over to batteries has been amazing. And I've stayed that way ever since. Certainly, if you're on a budget, you're just getting started, you don't have that kind of money, and, you know, maybe you're not using them as much. Would you be making a mistake working with the MS300, the MS200? God, no. I mean, for the price, they are insanely inexpensive. Well-built, et cetera. I mean, all of these strobes that you're going to look at today, it doesn't matter what the brands are. You know, they've got that kind of heavy plastic casing. It's not a metal casing or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you drop them, there is the potential for breakage or you know, chipping of the plastic. And it's with any of them. Profoto will do the same thing. Okay. Not to mention, you know, the bulbs in that, or the flash tubes, regardless of what brand you're using, if you've got an exposed tube type, they are, you know, glass, they can break. Okay. I will say I do like the way this bare bulb is designed. I don't do this carelessly, but I can grab that bulb and change it, and I don't have to worry about the fact that I've grabbed the bulb because I'm not actually touching the flash tubes. The flash tubes are in this case. Now, before I use this again, I will wipe it off, but it's the flash tubes that you have to be careful about touching, right? So that in and of itself is also kind of a nice thing for somebody like me that tends to work in a little bit of a hurry and sometimes is not paying as much attention as I should. So it makes it a lot easier for me to, just go ahead and clean it off with a towel, put it back in, done, problem solved, right? So let's see, round head, TK. Do I use the round head? No. Round heads are honestly a waste. They really are. So I read bunches of different things about why people like round heads. And my favorite is the photographers that talk about round heads are softer light. They're smoking crack. It's not softer light. It's just not, okay? Plus, not to mention, you might have noticed that your camera has a rectangular sensor. So what exactly do you perceive the benefit of the round head to be? Okay? You got to understand, right? Here's what you got to say. And it helps to be old to understand it because I've seen the evolution. So back in the 1970s and probably in the 60s, but I started using them in the 70s, the go-to flash, portable flash. Yeah, we actually had flashes back then. And they weren't the kind that made a loud pop and then you took the bulb out either, okay? It was what everybody commonly referred to as a potato masher. It was a Honeywell, okay? And it was a handle and it had a rectangle, not round, but a oval-shaped face to it, okay? Fine. But then companies like Vitar and Sunpack came out, started making strobes, and if you weren't looking at a studio strobe, everything was rectangular. And rectangle makes sense because your film format, your sensor format, it's rectangle, okay? When you've got a light source that's that small, gang, whether it's like the V1 or whether it's, a rectangular Fresnel head, there's not enough difference in size between the two heads to make a difference on your subject. And the best part of it is, I know TK or whoever is loving this here, Pablo loves the V1. You guys are probably like headed over to YouTube right now and you're going to find somebody that's like, this is the greatest thing ever and it's the best light I've ever seen. Well, you know what? They're wrong. They're just straight up wrong. And here's why they're wrong. Science is on my side. Science wins, gang. I hate to tell you, photography is physics. It's physics. Yes, there's an art component. And we can debate the art forever. But the physics, you can't debate. Research how the inverse square law works. Research what happens to the light once it leaves the light. I'm not going to give you that lesson because I've got video after video talking about it. I've got a whole video just about the inverse square law, and I talk about it constantly. You're not getting better light with a round light. Once people have all bought speed lights, which if you go back about 3 years when these round lights started coming, so those of you that have them, come on, little history lesson. Go back about 3 years. Godox had been around for a while. They were selling speed lights like crazy. Who else needs a speed light? Profoto, their speed light had been out forever. Who else needs a speed light? Everybody had a speed light. Who else needs a speed light? How many speed lights do you think these companies can sell? It's like modifiers. Once everybody has an umbrella, why do you need another umbrella? Once everybody has a softbox, why do you need another softbox? But you'll buy another softbox if they come out with one that's got red stripes or it's got some guy's name on it and that guy says it's the best softbox ever made. You'll go buy it. Well, at least some of you will. These companies need to make money. So they have to come up with stuff that looks and feels different and basically try and get you excited about it. And so they go out and they find a photographer who's good. They get them to take a bunch of really cool pictures with it. And then they show off those pictures and say, look what you can do. But the fact is, you can't do it. If you could do it, they would have hired you to do it. The guy they hired, he can do it because he understands the lighting. He understands the inverse square law. He knows how to make really cool light. Or she. Please, let me be clear. Either way. So again, the point is, Don't fall into that trap, gang. Look, if you like your V1, good for you. But if you think your V1's giving you better light, you're just sadly mistaken. It's not giving you better light. So at least, you know, do some educating yourself so that the next time you spend money, you're making a conscious decision to buy something that's not really benefiting you in the way that you think it is. And what do I always tell you about all this stuff? Don't believe me. I'm some guy you found on YouTube. Just like these people that I'm telling you not to listen to. If you really want to progress with your photography, take the stuff that I'm telling you should go look at, like the inverse square law, and research the science, and then be an intelligent human being and figure it out yourself, because it's actually not that hard once you understand. If you just want a shortcut, well then, yeah, you go find an influencer. Think of, you know, influencers. What is that word? Go look up the meaning of that word. And yet you will treat these influencers like they're speaking the gospel. They couldn't possibly be wrong. They're an influencer who's getting paid. Influencers don't make videos unless they're making money, right? That's why I walked away from all sponsorships, in big part, because the way the industry is gone, anybody that's going to hand you money or hand you gear, they want you to influence the sales. I don't want to do that. I want to be able to be honest. One of the luxuries that I had with Olympus, I was very, very lucky. Olympus let me be me and let me do what I do. And I enjoyed the challenge of trying to show photographers organically that if you do good photography, you can do anything with a Micro Four Thirds sensor. I loved that challenge. But I never had words put in my mouth. I was never pushed that, you know, you've got to sell this, you've got to sell that, ever. But the industry, you know, things evolve. I talk about that all the time. Things evolve. The industry right now is very heavy on influencers, and it's all about influencers because influencers make it easy. Get an influencer that's got a big audience, and there's going to be, you know, X percentage of that audience that'll run out and buy that product. I don't want to be that person. Okay, I get it. Some of you make purchases because of things that I say that I do, but I put my head on the pillow at night. I have a very clean conscience. I don't have any skin in the game. I'm not getting paid to say that. I'm telling you because it's what I use. It's what I use to create my art and to pay my bills. That's why I share the information I share. So again, I do want to repeat something I said earlier. FJ Wescott lights, they're not bad lights. Jinbei's a good brand. FJ Wescott is potentially, in my opinion, an amazing company. I mean, especially the way they started in their history with modifiers and everything, it's great. But, you know, they got money hungry. And you're paying for it. You should hold them accountable, right? I don't want to see them go away. I want to see them maybe pare back, maybe trim down, maybe cut out some of this influencer crowd. I don't care how these companies do it. It's I'm going to take the Walmart mentality. When companies go to Walmart and they want to sell in Walmart, Walmart tells that company, this is what we'll pay you for it, period. And if the company doesn't like that price, Walmart says, there's the door. It's up to the company to figure out how to sell it at that price. You can read case studies like Rubbermaid, for instance. The company Rubbermaid, they credit Walmart with saving their business because that's exactly what Walmart did. I'm not Walmart, but I'm just saying, hey, look, as an industry, if we would hold these companies accountable, we could get better products, better service, and we don't need these companies to be big and massive. We need these companies to work for us. That's what we want, right? And trust me, I see these companies at trade shows. I talk to these people. They don't really appreciate that I say this, but they know I'm not wrong. So we have conversations. I know many of them by name, right? All I want for you folks is just don't blow your money, because all the money that you blow is not making your photography better. Only practice and shooting and hard work makes your photography better. Done, right? So another question that's in here, where did it go? One got retracted here. Can feel music. The Djembe optical snoot is the same as the Lindsay Adler, $400 a pound price difference. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's like that. And to be clear, I've seen like the Lindsay Adler knockoffs, and There are some that are very different, but very similar. And then there's one or two that are almost exactly the same. But at least with the Lindsay Adler, you're getting, it is a value add. Now, is it worth the difference? That's up to you to decide. Okay. But you're getting the value add of cutouts and designs and shapes that she has selected and that she works with. Right. So take that for, how you will. But yes, are there less expensive options that do essentially the same thing? Yeah, just like there are with, the Manny Ortiz collapsible beauty disc, just like there are with the Jerry Gahonis Ice Light, Joel Grimes backgrounds, all those things. Look, I know these people. I see these people when I go to speak. I have conversations. I've had dinner with Lindsay Adler and her mother. Like, I know these people. I love these people. I have mad respect for them. But my role is to advocate for you and for all of us, because, we're kind of in this together, right? We're all out there spending money and buying gear. There's nothing that says as an industry that we have to do it blindly. And we should not be just following along like sheep, period. Okay? Charlie L., I needed to replace all of my studio and speedlights about 3 years ago, partly based on a comment by me. Okay. I started the transition to Godox using the X2 TC and 2 speedlights, and now all Godox. Good. Yeah. I'm honestly, I'm very happy with them. I don't think I've ever actually been happy, sincerely. And again, I've bought all mine. I'm not sponsored. I don't get paid. I'm not making any money, right? I don't think I've ever actually been happier with a lighting system. And it's just because of the simplicity. It's because of the fact that they are workhorses. I've yet to break a single piece of Godox gear, and the versatility, right? So let's see here. What else was there? Pruish J, question about light meters. Are those still needed with modern cameras? It's a question you'll get a lot of different answers on, Jay. So here's what I would suggest. There's a really good argument to say, yes, they're still important. I'm going to leave the word needed out, right? Yes, they're important. And then there's a good argument that says, well, maybe not. So let me explain, right? I mean, shooting as long as I have, I can walk into a studio, and because I'm working with mirrorless, what you see is what you get. Or for that matter, even with a DSLR where you shoot and then chimp right away, or tether and see it on a screen, I can work out the proper exposure without a meter and have a very good file. And if I really want to be like really anal and fussy about it, I can also, monitor the histogram and, do all that kind of stuff. I don't need a meter to do that. So then, gosh, Joe, if that's the case, how do you make an argument for a meter? Well, meter can be beneficial in several ways. Number one, for somebody that's relatively new to photography, and when I say relatively new, I mean like you're at a point where you've got the bug, you've been bit, like, you're all in, right? I would recommend for somebody like that, buy a meter for a couple of reasons. Number one, what it's going to do is it's going to slow you down. And that's actually very valuable. It's going to slow you down and force you to pay more attention to exposure. And it's going to help through practice and working with it. It's going to help you develop a much better understanding of the relationships between shutter speed and aperture and ISO, because it ain't the damn exposure triangle. If there's any of you here that have not heard me rant about the exposure triangle, it's not a thing. It's just not. It used to be. And even then, it was a bad thing. The exposure triangle is based on ISO. There is no ISO now. There is gain now. Also, the science piece behind it, the exposure triangle was a memory technique. In your brains, memory and understanding happen in two completely different places. They're not connected. So memorizing something, you get a participation award. You memorized it. It doesn't mean you know what to do with that information. It's more important to understand the relationships, because then you know what to do with it. Because honestly, there's not much to memorize when it comes to shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Not much at all. So that's really the biggest benefit for a meter. It's going to slow you down. It's going to make you do deliberate things. If you're a person who's like me, who's a little bit type A and has a problem slowing down, which I did for years, then a light meter becomes very, very handy because it's one more thing in your workflow that demands your attention when you use it. So it slows you down and forces you to pay more attention to your subject as well as your exposures and everything else, which is actually very beneficial to making sure that you're getting good images. Okay. So scrolling back up here, let's see. I thought I saw one more. As Broderick went Godox day one of my pursuit of becoming a strobist, not a single regret. Price and the fact that everything works together were the main factors. Yeah. Honestly, I can't say enough about them. But by the way, my final words here, since I'm almost out of time, for those of you that are in that position where you're looking at flashes. So let me repeat something I said in the beginning, but then let me give you one last piece of advice. And you've probably heard me give this piece of advice before. Number one, I am not recommending that any of you need to go out and buy new lights. If you own Wescott and you're happy with them, then damn it, you've got the right lighting. Done. Right? Doesn't mean you can't hold the company accountable to do better, but you've got the right lighting. Good. Same with Profoto. If you're happy with it, good for you. Okay? This conversation, again, is geared for people that are really looking to get into lighting and build out a system. But that also means think back to 2 weeks ago, the 10 steps that I gave you. One of the last steps on that list was use it. Try it out, touch it, okay? Handle it. You can rent this stuff. You can walk into camera stores, if you have a camera store that you're accessible to, that sell them, and at least handle it and see how it works and get a feel for it and look at the menus. Have a salesperson walk you through the menu. Every menu on the market, Profoto, Wescott, Godox, they all have their good sides and bad sides. Menus today for flashes are much better than they were 15 years ago. Much better, right? And just like anything else, no different than people complain about the menus on the backs of cameras. Camera menus, I don't care what brand you have, camera menus are both good and they both suck, right? There is no perfect one. There just isn't. And part of that is because we're not really using cameras anymore, are we, folks? We're using computers. So there's a lot of stuff that got to stick in that menu. And so much of it is similar or overlaps or gets used differently. I don't know that there'll ever be a perfect menu until we get to the point where the camera can completely read our minds, right? Which I don't know that that's entirely going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. So, yeah, I mean, whatever you can do, try to use it, test it out, at least handle it, get a feel for it. And then worst case scenario, if you're in a place where you can't do any of that, make sure that you're doing your mail order shopping with a company that has a generous return policy, okay? So, Cafel Music, Marcus picked shoots with his old Godox 600 for years, dropped it even more last week, tried it and it works, yeah. And yeah, again, when people tell you it has a bluish tint, it has a yellow tint, look, here's what you gotta understand. If you go look up the independent testing on all these strobes, none of them are perfect. They all have variations in light output. They all have variations in color temperature. Now, some are a little bit better than others, right? Godox, when it comes to the variables, or excuse me, not Godox, Profoto, when it comes to the variables, tends to do best of all of them, right? That's part of what you're paying for, but then you have to be asking yourself, am I ever going to see that variable? Is that variable ever legitimately going to have impact on what I'm shooting? And that's why my very first statement, the overwhelming majority of photographers, so that's including professionals, don't need that kind of accuracy. If you have the money to spend for it, okay, that's up to you, right? But that's also not saying just because Profoto is better, that's not saying that Godox and Wescott suck, because they don't. And if you look at the side-by-side charts on Godox and Wescott when it comes to output consistency, color consistency, and that, they both bounce back and forth a little bit. Like, you know, Wescott will be up, Godox will be up, and vice versa. At the end, it nets out. They're pretty much the same, okay? Pruish J, yes, you can fix those things with white balance, but there's another element when you have tints happening, right? But we're talking bad tints, not the kind of tints that are discussed when somebody says Profoto tends to be a little bit blue, or somebody said earlier that Godox is a little bit yellow, which I've never run into that problem. But those kind of tints, the average photographer is not going to notice them, number one. Number two, I would want confirmation from that photographer that they don't have their camera set on auto white balance when they get that tint. Because if you do, well, duh, okay? But here's the thing. Let's just say that you needed something that was super, super, super accurate. Like you were tasked, you were hired to photograph and reproduce the Mona Lisa. Well, you've got to get the color right. You've got to get everything. It's got to be perfect, right? That's a situation where you don't want any color fluctuation, anything to be off, because let's just say that the light does have a little yellow tint. You can color balance the yellow, but what you can't do easily is fix the color relationships that changed because of the yellow light. So again, are any of us going to see that in our photographs? No. Have I ever seen it in my photographs with Godox? No. With Pulse Buffs? No. Any of them? No. You're not. Okay? But if you were doing something that required extreme accuracy, then it could be a problem. Okay? Sherman Bueso. Here's my last one I'm going to read because I got to go. Even if the cameras read our minds, one day people will still complain. This camera's crap because I was thinking something else. Yeah, you're right. So I'll tell you guys a really fun story. I mentioned that my video last week, F-Stoppers wrote an article about it and shared it. It's got one comment. You can go see for yourself. But this guy that made the comment basically rips me to shreds. He's like, oh, 7 minutes of advertising. It's a bunch of crap. This is the problem with social media. If you click on that guy's profile, you'll see that that guy has left over 1,200 comments on articles in like the last 3 years. And he's saying that's the problem with social media. So yeah, there's always going to be people that complain, right? This guy is actually, he's like the poster child for a photography troll. Hey, it is what it is, right? You know, you don't let that stuff get under your skin. But again, folks, the simple message is take your time, do your due diligence, put in a little bit of research. It's going to pay you dividends in the long run because you're going to have gear that does what you need it to do, that you're happy with, that you understand, and you're going to be paying more attention to your photography. So that being said, go pick up your cameras, shoot. You got less time than you used to. You need to take pictures. Your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios, gang. Take care. Have a great week.